perfect life? What if your perfect life that everyone envies was actually an illusion? What if everything you thought you had lived for 35 years wasn't real? The story I'm about to tell you will show how fragile reality can be. Are you ready? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. My name is Catherine Kate Morrison. I'm 55 years old and I live in Chicago, Illinois. I'm a successful financial advisor working at Goldman Sachs. My annual income is $2 million. I've been married to my husband Michael for 20 years. We have two beautiful children, 18-year-old Sophia and 16-year-old Daniel. We have a $5 million house in Lincoln Park, a perfect life. Everyone envies me. My college friends, work colleagues, neighbors. They all envy Catherine Morrison's perfect life. And I love it. I worked hard for this life. But something happened last week. Something strange. I started questioning my life. It all started that Monday morning. On my way to Goldman Sachs on the metro, I saw a strange man. He was old, bearded. He looked at me and smiled. He called me Catherine and asked how I was. I didn't recognize him. When I asked who he was, he introduced himself as Dr. Richards. He asked if I remembered him, said we hadn't seen each other for a long time. I didn't remember him at all. I apologized, said I was in a hurry. The man asked me if everything was real, if I was sure. It was a strange question. Of course everything was real. What did he mean? He asked me to think. Really think. He asked what my first memory was. My first memory. Actually, I didn't remember my childhood very clearly. But wasn't that normal? Not everyone remembers their childhood clearly. He asked where I met Michael. Actually, I didn't remember exactly. We had met at university, I guess, but the details were blurry. The man smiled and said we'd see each other, then got off the metro. That conversation stayed on my mind all day. I really didn't remember the details of my life very well. My childhood, youth, meeting Michael, everything was blurry. When I got home that evening, I asked Michael where we had met. He laughed and said what a strange question it was. We had met at Northwestern, in the library. I had come to his table asking for a pen. Then we started chatting. It sounded right, but I didn't remember it clearly. I asked if we had ever talked about my childhood. Michael paused. He asked what was wrong with me. He said we had always talked about my childhood, that I had lost my father at a young age. My mother raised me alone. We lived in Detroit. Yes, it was true. But why did I remember it so blurry? The next day on my way to work, I looked for that man again, but didn't see him. But something strange happened at the office. Secretary Jana told me that Dr. Richards had called and wanted to see me. Dr. Richards, that man from the metro, how had he found me? When I asked Jana who this Dr. Richards was, she said she didn't know, that he said he had a private appointment with me. I called the number. Dr. Richards answered. He said we needed to meet, that it was very important. I asked who he was, how he knew me. He asked if I wanted to come and see, said he knew a lot about me. I was curious. I got his address. I went during lunch break. Dr. Richards' office was in a strange place, in an old building, a dark room. There were strange devices on his desk. He asked me to sit, said what he was going to tell me might be shocking. I said I was listening. He told me I was a psychiatric patient, that I had been under his treatment for 35 years. I was shocked. I said I wasn't sick, that I was a successful advisor. He said it was time to face reality. He said I was staying as an inpatient at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital for 35 years. I said it was nonsense, that I had Michael, children, a job. He took out files from his desk. He said these were my medical records. I had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. I was experiencing severe hallucinations. I opened the files. My name was really written there, but this was impossible. I asked who Michael was. He said Michael was a nurse. He was taking care of me. He said Sophia and Daniel didn't exist either. They were figments of my imagination. I said this couldn't be true, that I had talked to Michael last night, played with my children. He said I was currently lying in the hospital, in my single room. Michael was a nurse, giving me medication. My head started spinning. I asked about my job, Goldman Sachs. He said I had never worked at Goldman Sachs. I was a high school graduate. Before getting sick, I had worked as a waitress. I asked about my house in Lincoln Park. He said it was a single hospital room. He said I had gotten sick at age 20. I was now 55. I had been in the same room for 35 years. I stood up. I said this couldn't be true, that he was crazy. He asked me to calm down, said he knew this wasn't easy. I ran out of the office. I took a taxi home. I took out my key, opened the door, but the house was empty. There was no furniture. The walls were white. There was nothing. I shouted Michael's, Sophia's, Daniel's names. No sound came. It was an empty house. I ran to the neighbor. I knocked on Mrs. Peterson's door. I asked Mrs. Peterson where Michael and the others were. The old woman looked at me strangely. She asked who Michael was, said this house had been empty for 5 years. I said I live here, that I had a husband, Michael, and children, Sophia and Daniel. She asked who I was. She said no one had ever moved into this house. I ran to Goldman Sachs. I told security I was Catherine Morrison. They said no one named Catherine Morrison worked there. I said I had worked there for 15 years. They said they were sorry. I wasn't in their records. My head spun. I sat on the sidewalk. How was this possible? My cell phone rang. It was Dr. Richards. He asked where I was, said they were looking for me. I asked who was looking. He said the nurses were looking. I had escaped from the hospital. I asked if I had escaped. He said it was dangerous for me. Asked me to come back. I asked which hospital. He said Riverside. Asked me to come. I took a taxi to Riverside Hospital. It was a big, white building. There was security at the door. I said my name was Catherine Morrison. Asked if I was a patient there. Security looked at the records. He said yes. I had been staying there for 35 years. He asked how I had gotten outside. Dr. Richards came in, and there was a young nurse with him. She was blonde, beautiful. Dr. Richards called me Catherine. The nurse said they had been very worried about me. This voice, it sounded familiar. I asked her if she was Michael. The nurse smiled. She said her name was Sarah, that she was my nurse. But she said I always called her Michael. I asked about the children. They said there were no children, that I was alone. Dr. Richards took me by the arm. He said he would take me to my room. We went up to the 3rd floor by elevator. There was a long corridor, rooms on both sides. We stopped in front of room number 237. He said this was my room. The room was small, single bed, desk, chair. There was nothing on the walls. I asked if I had been living here for 35 years. He said yes, but I always thought it was a big house. In Lincoln Park, I sat on the bed. I asked about my money, my $2 million income. He said I received a patient salary, $800 per month. I asked about my work colleagues, clients. He said they were all imaginary. I had never worked at Goldman Sachs. Nurse Sarah sat next to me. She said I was a very intelligent patient, that I created very detailed fantasies. I lived in my own world. I said it was so real. She said they sometimes played along with my fantasies. I would call her Michael. She would play the Michael role. This calmed me down. Dr. Richards took out medications from the desk. He said I had stopped taking my medications. That's why reality and fantasy got mixed up. I asked what medications. He said antipsychotic medications. They controlled my hallucinations. I took the medications, swallowed them. After a few minutes, my head became clearer. I asked Dr. Richards if I had really been here for 35 years. He said yes. Schizophrenia had started at age 20. Severe hallucinations. I lived in my own world. I asked what my real life was. He said I was born in Detroit. I lost my father at age 10. My mother raised me alone. I barely finished high school. I worked as a waitress at a restaurant. I got sick at age 20. I asked where my mother was. He said my mother had died 5 years ago. Heart attack. I started crying. My 35-year life was a lie. Michael, children, job, house. None of it was real. Sarah said I was a good patient. I didn't harm anyone. I just lived in my own world. I asked if I would ever be normal. She said schizophrenia doesn't get better, but can be controlled with medication. If I took my medications regularly, I would have fewer hallucinations. But this was just the beginning of the story, because that night, lying in my bed, I started noticing very strange things. The walls of the hospital room were very odd. Sometimes they seemed big, sometimes small, as if they were moving. Sarah's face kept changing too. Sometimes she looked like Michael, sometimes like someone I didn't know at all. I could hear Dr. Richards' voice in the walls. He was talking to me, but he wasn't in the room. In the morning when Sarah came, I told her about these strange things. She smiled and said these were side effects. It would be like this until the medications got used to my body. But there was something else. When walking in the corridors, I saw other patients. They were acting strangely too. One patient was constantly talking to the air. Another patient was drawing on the walls with invisible pens. And I was among them, living with my own hallucinations. Days passed. I continued taking my medications, but the hallucinations didn't completely stop. I still saw Michael sometimes. I heard the children's voices. One day I asked Sarah, what was I doing before I got out? In the hospital? She said every morning I would get up, shave, put on a suit, Then I would say I'm going to work. But actually, I was walking in the corridor. I would recite phone numbers, pretending to talk to clients. I asked what I did in the evening. She said in the evening I would say I'm coming home. I would kiss Michael, play with the children. But no one was around me. I asked if it had been like this for 35 years. She said yes. I was a very regular patient. I would do the same routine every day. I asked if I had never noticed the truth. She said very rarely. Once or twice a year, the medications would get disrupted. I would understand the truth. But then I would return to my fantasy world. This was very scary. For 35 years, I had done the same routine like a robot. Every day I had gone to an imaginary job, lived with an imaginary family. I asked Sarah about the other patients in the hospital. She said there were 200 patients. Everyone had different illnesses. I was one of the most harmless patients. I asked if I could go outside. She said I could go out under supervision, but not alone. That day I went out to the hospital garden. For the first time in 35 years I saw the real sky. But strangely, it seemed familiar, as if I had seen it before. When I told Sarah this, she smiled. In my hallucinations, I always imagined the same sky. This was very strange. Reality and my fantasy had gotten so mixed up that I could no longer tell which was which. I lived like this for weeks. I continued taking medications, but I still saw Michael occasionally. I heard the children's voices. One day I asked Dr. Richards a very important question. How real are these hallucinations? He told me something very interesting. These fantasies had been constructed so detailed in my brain that they were indistinguishable from real memories. For me, Michael had really existed. I asked which life was more valuable. He said he couldn't answer that question. It was a matter of philosophy. I thought for weeks. Real life, 55 years old, sick, alone, poor. Fantasy life, successful, happy with family. I asked Sarah which life was better. She said she didn't know. It was my choice. That night I thought a lot. My real life was depressing and empty. My fantasy life was perfect and happy. In the morning I made my decision. I told Sarah I didn't want to take my medications. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. My fantasy life was better. She said it wasn't healthy. I said I wasn't harming anyone. I just wanted to be happy. Sarah thought. She said okay, but with regular checkups. I stopped the medications. Slowly Michael came back. The children appeared. My house, my job returned. Now, I'm living my perfect life again. I'm happy with Michael. My children are growing. My job is great. Sometimes I remember the truth. That I'm in the hospital. That Sarah is a nurse. But I don't care. Sometimes Sarah asks, "Are you sorry, Catherine?" I say no. Everyone seeks happiness. I found it, she says. But it's not real. I say it's real for me. That's enough. But the story doesn't end here. Because 6 months after returning to my fantasy world, I started experiencing much more complex things. Now I wasn't just seeing Michael and my children. Other characters began entering my life. My mother Pearl, who had died 5 years ago, was visiting my house. My father Robert, whom I lost as a child, was now playing with his grandchildren. Even my university friends, former work colleagues, They all took their places in my life. I had created such a detailed world that the line between reality and fantasy had completely disappeared. My office at Goldman Sachs felt completely real. I was having phone conversations with clients, signing big deals. I had even attended Sophia's university graduation. I was watching Daniel's basketball games. Michael and I were having romantic dinners, making vacation plans. It felt so real that sometimes even I forgot which was real. Sarah would sometimes come for checkups, but I had become so accustomed to seeing her as Michael that it was becoming difficult to remember her real identity. One day she told me something very important. "Catherine," she said, "your fantasies are getting very complex now. Sometimes there are contradictions within them." I asked her what she meant. For example, you're simultaneously at a meeting at Goldman Sachs and playing games with your children at home. Your brain is processing two different scenarios at the same time. This really was a strange situation. Sometimes I felt like I was in multiple places at once. While thinking I was in a morning meeting, I felt like I was grocery shopping in the afternoon. Sarah said this could be dangerous because my brain was getting overtired. My connection to reality could be completely severed. But I didn't care because I was very happy in this complex world. I even continued adding new fantasies. I wasn't just a successful financial advisor anymore. I had also become a best-selling author. My book Women's Power sold 2 million copies. I was appearing on TV programs, giving motivational speeches for female entrepreneurs. I had even founded a charity. I was providing education scholarships to young women through the Catherine Morrison Foundation. Every day I became richer, more successful, and happier. Dr. Richards would sometimes come to check on my condition. He looked worried. "Catherine," he would say, "your fantasies are growing uncontrollably now. This isn't sustainable." I would ask him why it wasn't sustainable. "Because your brain is completely losing the difference between reality and fantasy. This is dangerous." But I didn't see the danger. My life was perfect. One day I experienced something very strange. While walking in the corridor, I saw another patient. This patient also started talking to me. She said her name was Jennifer. "Do you also create fantasies?" she asked. I said yes. I said I had a perfect life. Jennifer smiled. "Me too. I'm a queen. I live in a great palace." This was very interesting. Someone else having a similar experience. Jennifer and I started talking frequently. She would tell me about her queen life. I would tell her about my CEO life. Dr. Richards became very worried when he learned about this. Two hallucination patients influencing each other is very dangerous, he said. But we didn't care. Jennifer and I were friends now, both in the real world and in our fantasy worlds. We even started including each other in our fantasies. I was a guest in her palace. She was a consultant in my company. This was very fun. I wasn't alone anymore. But Dr. Richards' concerns were justified, because over time our fantasies started mixing together. Jennifer's queen story merged with my CEO story. Now I was both a company owner and a queen. This became so complex that I could no longer distinguish which fantasy was which. One day Sarah told me something very serious. "Catherine, you're now exhibiting 3 separate personalities. CEO Catherine, Queen Catherine and sometimes real Catherine. This scared me. Am I three different people? Sometimes within the same day you become three different yous. Each speaks differently, behaves differently. This really was dangerous. I was losing control. Dr. Richards wanted to intervene urgently. He would give me strong medications and try to stop the fantasies. But I resisted. No, I said, I love these lives, all of them. But you're disappearing, Catherine. The real you is vanishing. I told him the real me was unhappy anyway. These nooms were much better. That night in bed I thought a lot. Am I really three different people? CEO Catherine would wake up in the morning, wear stylish clothes, go to meetings. Queen Catherine would take walks in her palace in the afternoon, organize balls. Real Catherine would lie in the hospital bed at night, remembering the past. All three were me, but none of them were completely me. The next morning when Sarah came, I told her I had made an important decision. I don't want such complex fantasies. I just want my simple happy life with Michael and the children. Sarah was surprised. Does this mean you want to return to reality? No, I said. I just want a simpler fantasy. That day, I had a long talk with Dr. Richards. We would try to get my fantasies under control. I stopped meeting with Jennifer. I deleted the Queen Catherine fantasy. I decided to keep only my simple, happy family life. This was very difficult because my brain had created so many details that deleting them was painful. But gradually I succeeded. I gave up my CEO fantasies, my queen dreams. Only Michael, Sophia, Daniel, and my house in Lincoln Park remained. This was much more peaceful, not complex, just simple happiness. I've been living like this for 1 year now, simple but perfect. Michael goes to work every morning. I write at home. The children go to school. In the evenings we eat dinner together, watch television. On weekends we have picnics, go on trips. Ordinary, but very happy life. Sarah sometimes asks, "Don't you regret it, Catherine? Don't you miss those big fantasies?" No, I say, simple happiness is the best. Dr. Richards also comes, checks my condition. You seem more stable now. He says, "Yes, I have control now. I can choose how much fantasy to create." Sometimes I remember the real world, my hospital room, my 35-year illness. But this doesn't upset me because I have a choice. Painful reality or simple happiness? I chose simple happiness, and I'm satisfied with my choice. Because isn't the purpose of life to be happy? I'm happy. That's enough. What do you think? Complex reality or simple fantasy? Which Catherine would you choose? Unhappy real Catherine or happy fantasy Catherine? And in your life, which parts are real? Which are imagination? Have you ever thought about it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious.